Want to pass the PMP exam? We'll show you how. Hello and welcome back to the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com. I'm Cornelius Fichtner. This is episode 521. Thank you so much for being here today. As a reminder, the video for this episode is available at pm-podcast.com/521 or /YouTube. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Now then, preparing for the PMP exam is a critical milestone for any project manager, but this can feel overwhelming without a clear plan. Done right, your study routine and resources, they become powerful allies. If neglected, the exam can quickly become a stumbling block. So we want to explore tried and true techniques to help you study smarter, stay motivated, and walk into the test with confidence. And joining us today is my colleague and fellow team member, Rich Rushlow, PMP, who will share his firsthand insights and recommendations for a successful journey. Let's bring him in. There he is. Hello, Rich. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Cornelius. Thank you for the invitation.
Of course. Thank you for joining us here today. As always, we are live on various platforms. So if you're watching us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, on X during the live stream, please do go ahead and use the chat. Type it in, send it off. We'll bring it up and answer your PMP exam prep questions right here on the program. To get us going, Rich, the first thing that I have to say is congratulations on passing your PMP exam. When exactly did you pass your PMP exam, Rich?
October.
In October. So that's what about 5-6 months ago, right?
Correct,
so, yes. Yeah, the relatively newly minted PMP there. Wonderful. And this is the question that is probably on everybody's mind. That's why the people in this picture here, they're looking at you, Rich. They're really excited and they want to know, Rich, what would you do differently if you had to do this again? What is your recommendation here?
What would I do differently? I think what I would do differently is actually dedicate a little bit more time to it. And what I mean by that is once I've set my schedule, prior to setting my schedule to get to the point of taking the exam, I was vacillating a little bit here, study, a little bit there, study. And then once I got to that point, I was able to set up a nice schedule. And then I followed that schedule pretty much to the T. With the idea that I could, just continue on. What I did was, or what I would do differently is stick to the schedule a little more. There were times where, I was like, oh, I kind of know that stuff. I'm going to let it go. And that I would not do. I would actually go through each lesson a little bit more carefully on certain items and focus on that and then move forward with that. That's probably what I would do differently. Just stay focused on my the exam content outline and the schedule that I had created for myself.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to the study materials and resources, because that is probably a question that everybody has as well. So what study materials and resources did you rely on? And in looking back, how well did they really serve your overall exam preparation here?
Okay, me prepping for the exam. Again, like I stated a little earlier, I vacillated, tried to do it on my own. And the difference is I got a hold of PrepCast.
Right, that's our product. Yep.
Took the schedule that you offered us, tailored that schedule to fit what the time I had left, which was 12 weeks prior to the exam. And then I took the ECO, exam content outline, from PMI. And then with your schedule, I inputted the areas that I was going to work with, and set my schedule based on that. What I did then is, like I said, I set my schedule and then I followed it pretty much to the T. The resources that I would actually recommend and that you actually follow, get a hold of PMI, look at the exam content outline, get a scheduling format, however you're scheduling or whatever your scheduling format would be. I used your outline, your schedule outline, and then I just inputted the data from the ECO into that schedule, and I followed that schedule to the T. I didn't take any exams. I took a few minor exams prior to week 4. And then from week 4, I basically took exams daily, from 20 question exams to, more, depending on the timing that I had for the day.
So if you had to guess, how many questions did you answer in total?
Probably about 800.
Okay. Okay, that's more or less what I recommend as well. Somewhere between 750 to 1,000 is the number that I recommend to people. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I used PrepCast quite a bit. I did have an opportunity to use the PMI study hall.
Mm-hmm.
I basically used the PMI study hall exams is basically what I followed. I followed everything from the PrepCast, from the videos from 1 to the end, and just use the PMI exam simulator to give me a different perspective on questions.
Right.
The ones that we work with, the exam questions are a little bit more ambiguous, detailed, longer. So it actually makes you really think about the question, where with some of the questions in the PMI, they seemed a little bit easier for me. So I basically just use the exam simulators. Like I said, on a daily basis, I'd take 20 from one exam simulator and 20 from the exam simulator. And then I would do the same. So if I was working on a specific knowledge area, then I would do the same for both, just so that I could get a double dose of questions for the day.
Mm-hmm. And if I ask you to compare, you have the PrepCast simulator on one hand, you have the PMI study hall on the other side. If you now compare these two to the actual exam, was either of them helpful? Was one of them totally off or not close to the real exam at all? What would you say when you compare these two tools to the real exam?
Well, both tools, are good. They will prep you for the exam. I preferred working with the PrepCast exam simulator only because the questions were longer, more detailed. It forced me to focus on the scenario more, so that when I could read the scenario, then I would read the question, which would allow me to, most of the time, eliminate two of the answers instantaneously. If I compared the two, PrepCast for me was the best. It worked better for me.
Well, thank you for saying that. Yeah. And let's just be clear, even though you work for us, you're saying this because you really feel like that, or because I work for you, so I have to say this?
No, I'm not that way, but I appreciate that, Cornelius. It actually was better for me. For whatever reason, the PrepCast simulator for me is actually what allowed me to stay focused and, really work the questions. Because of they were a little bit more ambiguous. It forced me to stay focused during the exam, which in some cases is pretty tough to do. When you're taking an exam of 100 and something questions, it's pretty tough to stay focused sometimes.
So far, you've mentioned our products and PMI. Did you use any other books, third-party products at all?
If we look at so I basically used the books that PMI and you both recommend.
Yeah.
So you each recommended a series of books. I
Right,
use
that's the list that PMI has, the reference list
the
that they have.
reference list. Yes.
Okay.
I have all those books, and yes, I did
Wow.
reference those books, especially when I would go through the exam at the end, and then read what the answers were. Then I was able to go back based on what the question was letting me know and use that resource to get more in depth within that question.
And does that mean you did not use any other exam prep products at all? So just ours and PMIs, no PMP prep book from somebody else, no exam simulator from somebody else?
Nope,
No.
I did not.
Okay.
Those were the
Yeah.
two programs or the two resources that I used to get ready for my
Okay.
PMP
Yeah.
exam.
Now, there are a mass of prep products out there, and it's always very confusing for people when they come in. What should I use? What would your recommendation be in terms of narrowing it down? What to look for in a prep product?
For me, because at the beginning I was trying this and trying that and trying this and doing this, and what I found out was, for me, the Prepcast offered a bit more structure. It gave me a little bit. It gave me the idea and ways to be more structured for and prepping for the exam.
Okay, got it.
Now,
All right.
and the other resource I used was, every Wednesday night, I joined a PMI study hall group.
Oh yeah,
Where,
we're from Kevin Archibald, right?
from Kevin
Yes.
Archibald. That was a huge help. The reason I say that was a huge help is because when you're working with Kevin, or because I worked with Kevin, he not only went over the question and allowed us to figure the question out, is he would explain the differences between the answers and then where we were with that, and then his expertise and superior knowledge in the industry, allowed me to kind of open my mind a little more to the question. It gave me a couple different ways of looking at the question instead of just the one way that I was learning. So that really helped me out as well.
Right, different perspective, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Now, let's move on from the study materials here to the study schedule. You've already mentioned this earlier on, and you said, if I understood you correctly, you didn't have a study schedule right at the beginning. And how exactly did you structure it? I understand you used what we recommend and then just adjusted it.
Yes. So I took your schedule outline, copied it over to an Excel file, and then with the Excel file, I tailored that schedule with the ECO from PMI, so that I could make sure I studied everything. And I basically put it into the 12-week course, or the 12-week plan that I had set up for myself, and then followed that schedule, to the T.
Okay. Was there a particular routine that you followed where you said, I do this in the morning, I do this in the evening, that helped you to stay on track?
Yes. So basically what I would do is I'd always start with Prepcast, listening to your podcasts on the subjects. Then I would take a small exam, and then I would go to my resource books, kind of look at the resource books based on how I answered the exam questions. And then I would move over to study hall and take my exams via the study hall.
Okay, gotcha. We got a comment here from somebody on LinkedIn who asks, what other certifications are offered? Well, this particular conversation here is about the PMP exam from PMI, but PMI offers a whole family of certifications. There's the CAPM intro level type of certification. There's the PMI ACP, an agile certification. There is the PFMP, the portfolio management certification. I also am a certified Scrum Master, a CSM, offered not by PMI, but by a third party. There is the Google Project Management Certificate that some people like quite a lot. So there is a ton out there. And when it comes to decertification, it really is a question of what it is that you are personally looking for in order to move your career forward. So let me turn this around for you then, and Rich. Why, Rich, did you take the PMP exam? Why didn't you go for anything else?
The PMP exam. One of the qualities that I have is I'm really good at organizing things, and the PMP for me allows me to organize things and put them in a structure, and use the skills and the knowledges and the techniques from project management to, set up and put together a good plan, and that plan that allows me to be successful with the project at the end. The PMP allowed me to do that a little bit more, and it helped me. Well, it taught me some of the vital skills that I needed and some of the soft skills that I needed to pursue and work with, our stakeholders, because that's, key factor when it comes to project management, being able to work with your stakeholders.
Okay, wonderful. And in the meantime, I also found a link. Rich mentioned a study group earlier on, which is led by Kevin Archbold in Tucson, Arizona. And I have a link for those of you who are interested in joining that group. It's completely free. It is on Meetup. And the link is, I'm putting it here in the chat. It is pm-prepcast.com/study group. So pm-prepcast.com/study group. And that will take you straight to the study group by Kevin Archbold here. From here, we have planned to move on to the exam simulator, but frankly, we've talked about the exam simulator enough at this point. The horse is beaten to death, I think. But for those of you who don't know where to find it, our exam simulator can be found at pm-examsimulator.com. Moving on to our next topic, which is agile and hybrid concepts. And I'm bringing this up here because 50% of the exam is about agile and hybrid concepts. How was that for you, Rich? How prominently did you feel that agile and hybrid was on the exam?
Quite a bit, actually. To be honest with you, I was shocked to see that was so much agile on the exam. And for me, it made it a bit easier. Agile is kind of how I've lived my life. A lot of the jobs that I've had in the past, we were agile. We worked with the agile format. So when it came to it, when I took the exam, when I sat there and took the exam, my very first exam, I would say most of my questions, if not almost all of them in that first part, were agile. A lot of them were strict agile questions, and my first part of the exam I got through fairly quickly, and I had to go back and confirm that I answered all the questions, because it's just the way it was. But it was heavy agile, and it was good. I mean, it was just, I studied it. I worked with your PrepCasts videos on those, which covered a lot of the information that was on the exam. I know for me, the agile was just it once I got through that first exam and realized that the questions were that way, I got a lot more comfortable with the exam. It just made it simpler. I wasn't as stressed out. I walked in with the idea that, oh, there's so much to know. I'm not sure if I'm going to get through this. And what I realized is, with all the hours of studying that I did and all the extra studying, and what I mean by extra studying is, I would take one of your exams or one of PMI's exams, and if it took me 20 minutes, it would probably take me an hour to go through each question at the end.
The review, right? Yeah.
The review, and that review was tremendous help, because not only did it teach me what the correct answer was, it taught me why the other answers were not as correct or correct at all. So
All right. All right. Thank you. Thank you. We can't talk about specific questions on the exam or things that you were asked, but was there a particular topic that you felt in agile and hybrid concept that was really difficult for you to grasp and to get your head around?
um, distinguishing the difference between actual agile performance and hybrid performance. If you didn't read
Okay.
the scenario correctly, you would be stuck with, agile in your head. Yet some of the questions were hybrid where, it looked like an agile question, yet it was actually a predictive question. So, that was the thing that had helped me
Okay.
to distinguish
Okay.
the difference to just, between the two. So,
Between the two, yes. We have another comment here, this time from somebody on YouTube. And I would like to turn this around a little bit because our conversation here is more about preparing for the PMP exam, and this is more about a conceptual question. I know PMI discourages micromanaging team members, but I want to ask if there are exceptions or specific situations where you'll have to micromanage a team member. Now, personally, on the PMP exam, if one of the answers is micromanagement, I would say it is incorrect.
yep.
That would not be the one that I would choose. Okay. However, if the question were phrased around a situation, we have a younger team member who is inexperienced, and then one of the answers were to use a more directive style of leadership, then that could be the right answer because younger, inexperienced team members, they need a little bit more help, a little bit more, and I'm using air quotes here, big time, micromanagement, so more direction, more help. But as soon as you move into, this is an experienced person, then, we're talking about supportive and helping and removing roadblocks. So yes, younger person, directing, why not? But micromanagement as an answer on the exam, definitely, I would never select that. Rich, what do you think?
Not at all. Micromanaging your team, could deflate the team in the long run.
Yeah,
So it's better
especially if
to,
you're in an agile environment, right? Yeah.
positively, Um, so yeah, the exam won't have micromanage on there as any of the answers. It will have, like you were stating, other leadership styles on how to manage your team, whether it be mentoring, coaching, whatever it may be. Those are the words that you'll be looking for instead of micromanage, because you want to coach your team. You always want your team to become better than you. So
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. From here, we are moving on from Agile Hybrid to the PMI mindset. This is something that everybody talks about it. Rich, in your view, what does adopting the PMI mindset entail? How do you get this PMI mindset, and why is it crucial for the exam?
For me, I knew nothing about PMI mindset, when I first began studying. And that's why I was probably vacillating so much, going this way, going that way, and whatever. I did watch your 3 PMI mindset videos, and it changed the way I looked at everything, the questions, my study habits. Um, it, for me, I needed to get in the PMI mindset, the videos to help me get there. So that when I went to the exam, it was one of the last 3 things I did prior to taking the exam the next day was as I watched the 3 mindset videos again. And that was more for me just to understand that when I get there, yes, I could come up with many other scenarios and ask all these questions about the question that they're asking me. But what the mindset allowed me to do was stay focused on that question, and that, having that question and keeping the mindset based on the question and the scenario that was being asked at the time.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me do this. Let me bring in these 3 videos that you have just talked about. They are here on YouTube, and let me make this bigger so you can more easily see this. The link is pm-prepcast.com/mindset. I'm putting it right now into the chat as well. And I've recorded these 3 videos here. The first one, part 1 here, that talks about the PMI and the PMP mindset. How does PMI see project management? That's sort of the main idea behind this one here. Then the second one that you see here, part 2, this is the agile mindset. So how does PMI look at agile on the exam? And then the third one is the exam taking mindset. Many of us, we haven't taken an exam in years because, well, we've been out of school for so long. So what do you do? How do you prepare mentally for taking this exam? So this is what this is here in regards to the mindset. And oh wait, I gotta remove us here from that so we can see the URL, pm-prepcast.com/mindset. That is the link to these 3 videos that you can watch. From here, let's move on to the next topic, which is the exam day. How did you handle the logistics for this? I think the first question is, did you take this online or did you go to a local testing center?
I thought about taking the exam online, yet when I read some of the stories that had happened to people taking the exam online, I wanted nothing to do with that. I mean, if you close your eyes and look off the screen for more than 8 seconds, your exam is over. I didn't want, and I did that when I was at the exam center. I mean, there were times where I would just stare at this wall just so that I could kind of settle myself. But if you did that on the online exam, it would not happen. They would have actually shut your exam off. And I've done proctored exams before. They watch you like a hawk. I mean, absolutely like a hawk. If they can't see what you're doing, there's questions. I scheduled my exam 12 weeks out. I visited the exam site a couple days prior, just so that I could know exactly where the building was, know exactly where I was going, just in case, I was running late and I had to get there quick. I knew where I was going. Had I not done that and was running late, then, I'd have been super stressed out getting there. But I went downtown, looked at the exam site, and then and then went home. And then when I went into the exam, I got up, did my thing, went down to the exam center, waited outside patiently. They allowed us in. At that point, they have to check your ID. They confirm that you're taking the exam. And then once they do that, then you go into a separate room where they actually, pat you down, make sure you don't have anything on you.
I guess you have to take watches off and
yeah. I don't know if I took my watch off. Well, I don't know. Let me rephrase that. I didn't wear a watch that day. I didn't wear anything. I went in as plain as possible. I went in only with my wallet. I had my cell phone with me, but I left it in the locker. They give you lockers to put stuff in. I brought a protein drink, just a mixed protein drink, so that during my break I could get out and take that 10 minutes, which I feel you should do. You should take your break. It allows you just to reset so that you could come in and take the next series of questions. And then and then they just confirm that you're in. They walk you over to the exam simulator, where you're going to be taking the exam, and then they log you in, and then you're on your own at that point. They watched us via video, via window. And I know at one point somebody else was in the exam room taking a different exam, and I guess they did something he wasn't supposed to. So they came in and pulled him out, and then they allowed him back in. I don't know what it was. I was too focused on the exam, but she was basically saying, you're not allowed to do that. Da, 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 da. That's the only concept I got out of that. So, and they were really nice about it. I mean, you just want to go in and take your exam and relax and go from there. So.
Yeah, so I have two things to add to this. First of all, when it comes to the online exam, yes, there are horror stories out there of people just being absolutely, I just looked to the side and they kicked me out, right? Let's be absolutely clear. PMI and Prometric, they have rules in place. These rules are published. You know ahead of time what these rules are. And I'm sorry, if you break these rules, even if you break them inadvertently, right? PMI and Prometric, they have to enforce those rules in order to be fair to everyone, right? And some people, they comment on those horror stories saying, I just took my exam online. I started, I finished, it went without a hitch. I don't know what your problem is. So there are people who have great experiences online and others do not. So don't get me wrong here. I personally would also recommend go take it in person if you can, because the chances that you kind of do this inadvertently and then your exam is over, they're very high, right? And second, if you go and take it at a testing center, then in preparation, take your computer to the local coffee shop in the morning and take a couple of exams or quizzes at the coffee shop so that you get used to the noise around you. Okay. When I took it, I was in a relatively large room there. There were 10, 15 other people in there. It was constant coming and going. I think somewhere there was even a sledgehammer going off in the background, making noise. So get used to the fact that you are not in a clean environment, and that those are the two things I wanted to add here. Did you have any? Yeah, go ahead.
Also, one of the reasons I chose to go into the exam center is, if you have family, pets, and they come into the room, you're done. They're also, distractions that you don't need at that time.
Yeah.
And for me, once you're at the exam center, you're there for one reason, and that is to stay focused and take your exam.
Exactly.
And pass your exam.
Exactly. Yeah. The story that I always tell is the story of a student of mine that was about 8 years ago in Africa. He went into the testing room and they told him, if you stand up, you have failed your exam. You may not stand up. That is not the policy. That is not PMI's policy, right? That is incorrect. But here's what he did. Breathe in, breathe out, accepted it, and moved on. Because the most important thing at that point is not to argue, you are wrong. That's not what PMI wrote in the letter. I am allowed to take 2 breaks. I can get up, I can go to the bathroom. If they tell you, you are not allowed to get up and go to the bathroom, then you follow that arbitrary rule, even though we all know it is incorrect. Right? He passed his exam, by the way, because he just, yeah.
So the other thing I would recommend is take some full-length practice exams, because your time is up to you to manage. So you need to understand, how well you can do with so many questions. The exam doesn't stop. It doesn't stop until you click end. So it'll run and run and run. And before you know it, I've had other people state that they only had so much time left on the final exam because they were running out of time. So that was one of the things that I practiced a lot, was making sure that I was spending the correct amount of time on each question and not worrying if I had to spend a little bit of extra time on a question, because I knew,
on average.
on average on where I would be. So,
Mhm.
and then learn how to count the clock backwards. That's key, you know,
Yeah, it's a countdown, right? Yeah.
yeah, because it counts down. So, and then it has your break times in there. So you have to actually kind of calculate that out when you first start so that you know, oh, I need so much time for this exam, 10-minute break, so much time for this exam and 10-minute break. And
I
it could be
see.
that you may take an extra 10 minutes on your first exam because you need it, but then you know, okay, I'll take a 5-minute break and then go from there.
Mhm.
You just need to understand your timing when you're taking your exam.
Yeah, and to clarify for those who do not know, the PMP exam, 180 questions divided into 3 parts, 60 questions, 10-minute break, 60 questions, 10-minute break, 60 questions. And that's what Rich meant by exam 1. So it's part 1, part 2, part 3, really. I believe that's how PMI calls it. They calls it parts.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that. Don't quote me on that. Yeah. All right. Let's move on to our next topic here, which is breathe in, breathe out, stress management. Which part of the journey in the toward your PMP certification did you find most stressful? How did you cope with that?
The most stressful part of the exam for me, or the whole process of the exam, I think it was like on 5 days until the exam is when I really began to stress out because I had felt that I hadn't studied long enough or hard enough or enough. So that was probably the most stressful, only because the exam's coming, and I mean, for me, just from my experience, I wasn't passing my prep cast and or PMI exams in flying colors. Um, but I stayed with it. And so I actually went in with the idea that I might not pass. So I started prepping myself for the aftermath. Um, Yet when I got in there, the exam questions were perfect for me. Again, most agile, and I was able to do that. How I managed most of my stress, uh, I practice a breathing technique. I had learned to take a breathing technique with me. There were parts in the exam where I would sit there and I, was getting a little stressed out, and I would just breathe. I'd take a couple deep breaths in, couple deep breaths out, and then I'd recenter myself on that particular question.
Mhm. Yeah, we can also mention that PMI does offer special accommodations. So, for example, if you are a notoriously nervous test taker and you can get a doctor's note about that, there are ways for you to get more time, or I believe a separate room is even possible. Don't quote me on this, but there are various things that you can do. If you, like me, have hearing aids, or if you need a special screen with larger font, or you're in a wheelchair, so all of those accommodations are available if you need them. Did you use a calculator at all during the exam? Were there any questions where you had to calculate?
Not really hard calculations. They give you enough information to where, yeah, you may have to do an adding or a subtracting or a multiply, but something simple. But for the most part, there were actually no calculations on the test. If you read the question, the scenario correctly, and then read the question, I was able to eliminate 2 of the answers instantly because like, that's not happening. And then you were able to just look at them and then kind of calculate the numbers out. And in my case, I was able to calculate some of the numbers out of my head because I was able to go blah, 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 blah. That's going to be this. And then once I realized that the numbers were close, then those are the answers that I chose.
Yeah. Well, look at that. Harold from YouTube just asked if you meet any calculation questions. Just answered that for you there, Harold, a moment ago. What I can also say is that I took my PMP exam many years ago. A lot of calculation was in there now. PMI has realized that nowadays, even though it is important for a project manager to understand what earned value is and how it's calculated and what does it do, PMI also realizes that Our project management software does all of this now. You can click a button and there is the report. So PMI no longer really requires you to be able to calculate it, even though it's a good idea. PMI requires you to know what to do next. So if you have a report coming up that tells you that your CPI is X, what do you do next? Right? So those are the type of questions that you can expect when it comes to formulas and calculations. And yeah, the biggest problem is always this: in a stressful exam, 1 and 1 equals 3. Right? That's the biggest problem. So my recommendation is still the same. If you have a calculation and you feel a little bit nervous, use the built-in calculator on the screen. And 1 and 1 equals 2. You can be certain that the calculator will give you the right number. All right. We were just talking about stress, and we are now moving actually to the close of our conversation here today. Rich, what are your takeaways that you have for our listeners here today? Your 1, 2, 3 recommendations from you as a recent PMP exam passer. What would you tell them to look out for and to do as they are preparing for their PMP exam?
I think the first thing I would, if I needed to change or redo this, I think the first thing I would do is get my application in and set my exam date. Once I set my exam date, I would take the ECO and tailor a schedule to meet that exam date, and then use the resources that are available. Like for me, PrepCast, PMI, and that study hall, which were all very key for my success on passing the exam.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Rich.
Thank you, Cornelia.
Appreciate your time here today. I think we've got a few comments here. Very helpful advice from Sonia. Harold says, thank you, Richard. So everybody seems to be enjoying this conversation. Thank you for your time today. And once again, congrats on passing your PMP exam.
Thank you, Cornelius. It was great being here and always enjoy working with you.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Don't forget, if you would like to see the full show notes for this episode, go to pm-podcast.com/521. As always, our email address is info@pm-podcast.com. And finally, we have this. My PMP exam prep strategy is this here: being stranded on a remote island with the PMBOK guide. Until next time, everybody.